What are these sounds? Who's here? It's just a nightmare. Just a nightmare. I'm gonna wake up. I'm gonna wake up. What if it would be impossible to wake up from the nightmare? Imagine that you are always wandering the corridors of your imagination, revealing all your innermost desires and fears, turning them into completely real beings who only exist to make you suffer forever. It seems the easiest way out is just to die, but you come back to this madness over and over and over. That's right, the players have been having nightmares about the rural town of Silent Hill for 25 years, which strikes real superhuman fear into their hearts. It would be reasonable not to run this game at all, like a tape from the ring. But they don't. For some reason, it is vital for a gamer to experience this condition again and again. Maybe they do it to make sure that all fears exist only in games and dreams, so they can again feel alive. Therefore, today we'll try to bring you back to your heart's awe and memories of the legend of the horror genre. After all, the game is almost a quarter of a century old, both due to time and not very successful sequels. A fog of oblivion hung over the town of Silent Hill. Even the developer's Konami studio understands it and plans to remaster the most successful part of the series, Silent Hill 2. But will it breathe life into the legendary franchise? Why did Japan become the birthplace of the most terrible horror games in the history of mankind? What role did the Konami Outsider team play in this? Is Silent Hill just the embodiment of a sick imagination of developers, or is the world around them really so terrible? You will get answers to all these questions in this video. You're watching PressX. Prepare yourself for a large dose of sedative in the form of snacks and sit comfortably. We're getting started. The history of the origin of Silent Hill at first glance may seem typical for the gaming world of that time. A large and prosperous Japanese company, Konami, saw the success after the release of Resident Evil by Capcom and decided to do the same. But in fact, it all started long before Resident Evil. Even before the birth of the main game designer of Silent Hill, Keiichiro Toyama, mysticism, spirits, and a sense of horror have been in the blood of the Japanese for a very long time. Back in the 8th century AD, when Japan was hit by the first ever smallpox epidemic, people learned what fear was. The disease was so terrible that a third of Japan's population simply died out. Because of this, the Japanese began to believe that smallpox was a curse that was cast on them by an evil and vengeful spirit, Onryo. And in a few years after, the concept of kami would appear in the religious structure of Japan, which would mean the essence of God in various things or phenomena of nature. It combines a sense of danger, fear, and a sense of power, forming together the concepts of punishing and unshakable supernatural power. It is in the Japanese culture of kami spirits that their beliefs are formed, and it is from here that the progenitor of modern horror films, the Japanese literature genre kaidan, appears in Japan. It is based on the meeting of a person with ghosts or other supernatural creatures and events. Japan's sense of horror and the end of the world increased significantly since the end of World War II. After the tragic events of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, this catastrophe opened up a completely new understanding of the world for the Japanese. Their quiet and far from the outside world island became a real hell on earth. And most of all, it was reflected primarily in the cinema. The 1954 film Godzilla, which became the discoverer of the genre of films of disasters caused by a kaiju, a Japanese word that literally means strange beast, was released on the screens. Subsequently, the film Hell was released in 1960, the name of which speaks for itself. And in 1964, the movie Kaidan was shown in theaters, which contained 4 folklore mystical stories. The horror genre also began to take a dominant place in Japanese literature. Novels and manga told post-apocalyptic stories about life in the shadow of a world that had already collapsed. For example, Demon City Shinjuku by Hideyuki Kikuchi, or the works of Hideshi Hino, who wrote about 400 works in the horror genre. The state of hell on earth raged even in the social life of the Japanese because of the occupation by America. With the introduction of its own rules in Japan, a lot of people were against the new way of life, especially the younger generation of students of the 60s. The struggle against dissenting students and school children was so fierce that it escalated into violence on the part of the authorities. Because of this, protesting students took up arms and occupied their campuses to hold pro-government youth hostage. The protests were settled, but now the Japanese government tightened discipline and control in public schools. The atmosphere of tension and stress, as well as monitoring the appearance and behavior of children even outside of school, created a sense of being in concentration camps for young people. Consequently, over the following decades, there was a rapid increase in the number of teenagers who wished to pass away. They often chose the forest near Mount Fujiwara as the site for their final act. This forest, steeped in Japanese folklore, was now known as the Forest of Those Seeking to Pass Away. Remarkably, this forest still maintains its grim reputation, with the Japanese police discovering approximately 100 individuals there each month. In addition to internal cultural factors driving the development of the horror genre, the translation of the works of the French astronomer Nostradamus had a significant impact on the Japanese psyche. It was the Americans who introduced Nostradamus' writings to the Japanese in 1973. Nostradamus believed in the predictive power of the stars and penned a book of prophecies on the subject. However, a translation error resulted in Nostradamus supposedly predicting the end of the world in 1999. Specifically, this error occurred in his 1555 book, Les Prophéties. One of the prophecies purportedly foretold the arrival of a majestic king of horror descending from the heavens in July 1999. Funny? A bit. But suddenly, Japan really became fixated on Western occultism, fringe science, and prejudice. However, don't think the Japanese are foolish. Just remember yourself on the eve of 2012. Nostradamus' book has sold almost 1 million copies in the country, and afterward there was a surge in paranormal-themed TV shows. It was then that Japan started seriously discussing the existence of demons, witchcraft, vampires, psychics, and aliens. It became so popular that Japan even had its own Loch Ness Monster. It's in such a turbulent and mystical world that Keiichiro Toyama, the main developer of the future Silent Hill, was born in 1970. The future developer was born and raised in the small rural town of Miyakonojo in Miyazaki Prefecture. Toyama's father ran a small grocery store, so there was no possibility of a vast fortune in the family. Growing up, Keiichiro Toyama and his friends spent time in front of the TV watching the same mystical talk shows or reading manga and books about the occult, supernatural, and UFOs. Therefore, the only entertainment at the beginning of his journey was to wander around abandoned places and look for spirits there. Now you understand where the roots of the Silent Hill atmosphere come from. With the global development of the gaming industry, at the age of 14, Keiichiro delved into the world of computer games. Consequently, books and the pursuit of spirits took a back seat. He now devoted all his free time to playing the text-based adventure game Zork from Infocom, along with spending time on an arcade machine with the game The Tower of Draga of 1984. After graduating from high school at the age of 18, Toyama moved to Tokyo and resided there for 2 years, employed at a movie rental store. However, growing up wasn't as straightforward as Toyama anticipated. The prospect of spending his entire life working in a store did not appeal to him. So in 1990, he entered Tokyo's Zokai University, embarking on studies in film and television production. Nonetheless, he wasn't particularly keen on pursuing this path either, choosing the course primarily due to his aversion to mathematics. Until his 4th year at university, he remained uncertain about his future, until fate presented him with an opportunity. One day, a Sega representative visited Toyama's university in search of young and ambitious talent. For the future luminary of the gaming industry, this encounter was a sign.
自分はゲームっていうのはもう本当にユーザーとして大好きでずっと本当子供の頃からゲームに触れて育ってきていたんですけど、意外とそのゲームを仕事にするっていう発想っていうのはなかったりして、美術大学に入ったんですけど、ちょうど時代的に、いわゆる 3D のゲームが出るっていうタイミングで、本当に日本のゲームの業界って若い人をどんどん増やし、そういう時期だったんですよ。というところで、自分が作り手に回るとかそういうこともあっていいんだなみたいな、ふっとそういう気づきはありまして、ここは逆にちょっと本当にすごく意外ではあったけど自然な形で、そういう時代だったっていう感じだ。
I've always loved games and have been playing since I was a child. Strangely, I never pondered my future with them. I enrolled in art university just as 3D games were emerging, and the industry was increasingly in need of fresh talent. That's when I decided to explore my creativity as a developer. It was an unexpected, yet natural decision for me. In the 1990s, the gaming industry was experiencing rapid growth. It was during this era that the revolutionary shift to 3D rendering technology occurred, setting a trend that persists today. During Toyama's education in 1992, the first fully three-dimensional polygonal game was unveiled. It was Virtua Racing from the Japanese studio Sega. Initially released on arcade machines, the graphical innovation propelled Virtua Racing to become one of the 10 most popular arcade games in the history of the video game industry. Subsequently, all companies involved in console and game production recognized the potential in 3D, sparking a flurry of 3D game development, though many were lackluster and unappealing. Moreover, the transition to 3D led to the downfall of several classic game series, such as Earthworm Jim. In the same year as Toyama's graduation from university, the Japanese once again made waves globally. In 1994, Sony released the first PlayStation. As Toyama himself noted, the fact that my graduation from the university coincided with the release of the first PlayStation was serendipitous for me. Toyama proceeded to distribute his resume to numerous game companies. Despite his lack of experience, his inaugural interview proved successful. Thus commenced Keiichiro Toyama's career at Konami. His first project was a port of the 2D game Snatcher for PlayStation from the well-known genius Hideo Kojima. However, Toyama's contribution to the project was minimal. He served as an assistant graphic designer and adjusted the colors of the characters. His next project was the sports game International Track and Field, which was supposed to be released entirely in 3D. Moreover, it was intended to utilize motion capture technology, a first for Konami. Toyama also worked as a computer engineer on motion capture technology, which slightly elevated his status on the company. But the pivotal year in Toyama's life was 1996, when work on International Track and Field was completed. Thoughts about the possibility of creating his own project began to form in Toyama's mind. Meanwhile, the survival horror game Resident Evil was making a whole lot of noise within the walls of the Japanese studio Capcom. It became a massive success, selling over 12 million copies, and it would heavily influence the future of Silent Hill, but more on that later. Konami executives couldn't simply sit by idly while watching their competitor rake in huge profits. The Konami chairman decided to convene a meeting to discuss future game development plans. The main director of International Track and Field, Satoshi Satoshi Kushibushi, and Toyama himself were invited to this meeting. Konami's management presented Satoshi with two options. He could either continue working on the sequel to International Track and Field or create a new survival horror game for Konami. However, Konami lacked both the idea and the resources to embark on developing a game in a new genre, as they had never released a horror game before. Upon hearing these two suggestions, Toyama secretly hoped that Satoshi would opt out of the new horror project, as it could give him a chance to create his own game. And you've probably already guessed what Satoshi chose. Toyama's prayers were answered, and the track and field director decided to work on the sequel to the game. Since Toyama had experience working with 3D, it was him who Konami offered the opportunity to try his hand as a game designer for a new project. Thus, at the age of 26, Toyama, who had previously only worked on sports and text-based adventure games, faced a daunting and significant challenge: developing a survival horror game that could rival the success of Resident Evil, the upcoming Silent Hill. Of course, Toyama was thrilled to have some freedom and the opportunity to create something of his own. However, the state of euphoria quickly subsided as the role of project manager imposed a lot of responsibility on Keiichiro. The first question Toyama faced was where to find a team to develop the game. Konami had many employees due to the large production volumes of both arcade and regular games. Konami was involved in publishing their own games and porting games to other platforms themselves. Therefore, all potential applicants for the development of Silent Hill who already had work experience were engaged in other projects. Taking people from the street was risky. Therefore, Konami themselves assisted with the recruitment of Toyama's team. To develop the game under the code name Horror Adventure, a division of employees known as Team Silent was created. Its name presumably appeared later. Konami assigned people who had struggled in their previous projects to this division, or those who wanted to leave the company due to conflicts with management. It seems that Konami did not really anticipate the success of the upcoming game, or Toyama himself, which of course they would later regret. The first to join Team Silent were programmers who had previously worked with Toyama on International Track and Field. These were Imamura Akihiro and Oshima Naoto, who couldn't boast of a rich development experience. Before this project, Imamura had only worked on developing the main menu interface for International Track and Field, while Oshima has focused on modeling details for 3D backgrounds of the same game, which was also a relatively secondary task in development. The first artist to join the team was Masahiro Ito, who you can probably thank them for your childhood nightmares, as he designed all the monsters for the first 3 parts of Silent Hill. Toyama himself, upon seeing Ito's work at their first meeting, couldn't believe that he had drawn such a picture. By the way, Masahiro is one of those who remained the same artist on Team Silent up to the 2024 remake of Silent Hill 2. Joining them were Haruhiko Inaba, who would assist Toyama with the game's script, Masashi Tsubayama, who would take on the role of motion designer, and Takayoshi Sato, the creator of all CGI videos for the first part of Silent Hill. The last member of Team Silent was Akira Yamaoka, who joined the project after the previously appointed composer left the team. He would become the sound designer of the game. Today, Akira Yamaoka is a true legend of the game industry. He created the music and sound design for all the main games in the Silent Hill series. His music became an integral part of the team, giving Silent Hill the eerie atmosphere it's famous for. However, when Akira first joined the team, he was a bit surprised. He was the only one on the team who had quite a lot of experience in the industry. Before that, he had already composed soundtracks for games such as Snatcher, mentioned earlier, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and Contra Hardcore. Thus, these 8 guys formed Team Silent, which from the very beginning of its existence bore the brand of Outsiders of Konami. Of course, this had an impact on both the team and the future of Silent Hill. From the outset of development in 1996, the team encountered adversity. Toyama recalls,
同い年ぐらいの全員20代前半25、6というか、まあ20代は20代ですね。20代しかいないところで、なんだろう、だからその時ってもうスケジュールがとかその予算、バジェットがとかそんな単語一回も出てこなくて、もう好きにやっていいよ。それで当たったらめっけもんだし、ダメならダメだしみたいな感じでやらせてもらえて。それはそれで悲惨なこともあったけど、良かったなっていうか、ああいう時代をやらせてもらってっていう。
Neither Toyama nor anyone else had any ideas about the upcoming game. Moreover, there was no adequate funding from Konami at the beginning. The only guidance they received from management was that the game should be like Resident Evil, but not Resident Evil at all. How's that for a technical specification from the manager? Please click the like button if your boss enjoys giving such tasks. The logical consequence was the team's lack of understanding of how to take the first step. Time passed, and the workflow essentially came to a standstill. Konami employees and management lost hope for the potential success of Silent Hill. Meanwhile, the members of Team Silent increasingly felt like complete losers. The pressure from Konami was so intense that at some point, management began to demand that Team Silent simply copy Resident Evil but replace the main character, all in an effort to quickly enter the market with a new survival horror. However, for Toyama, this was unacceptable.
とにかくバイオと差別化しないことには意味がないっていうか、まあね、このゲームってなっちゃうのが出てもしょうがないっていうんで、どうしようかなみたいなところをやってて、まあいわゆる背景をフルポリゴンにしようとかそういうチャレンジとかあったんですけど、フォーカスしてるところはあるけど、こことりあえずどうしますみたいな時は、ぶっちゃけとりあえずバイオと同じもの作っといてくださいって。
So Toyama made a decisive decision and simply ignored all of Konami's demands. He aimed to make Silent Hill a game that wouldn't just make the player worry about the life of the main character, but would also evoke a wide range of emotions that they would never forget. Because of this, the team had one fundamental question for the upcoming game. What exactly would evoke a sense of fear in their game? Bingo! Toyama's mind immediately conjured up an image of the house in which he grew up, eternal darkness and narrow corridors, haunting his childhood memories. Darkness was precisely the element of atmosphere and fear that developers of Resident Evil had not fully used, so Toyama was confident that this was how they would be able to take the first step in development. Initially, Toyama envisioned implementing his idea by overlaying different 2D backgrounds on top of each other, similar to the model used in Resident Evil. However, Oshima Naoto had a different idea. He suggested using spotlighting. A few days later, he presented a technical example of his idea. It was something revolutionary.
We happy?
Oshima created a demo, a 3D model of a 10 square meter room and a low polygonal model of a girl. The central accent of the demo was spot lighting, which simulated the operation of real lamps and flashlights. It was thanks to this lighting and the three-dimensional polygonal model of the girl that shadows were cast on objects and areas in the room were completely darkened. This achieved the same dark effect that Toyama had envisioned. Of course, this may sound commonplace now, but it was 1997. However, even this solution had its own challenges. The method devised by Oshima required a large amount of RAM to render the area, and objects and spaces illuminated by multiple light sources looked just awful. Once again, Oshima found a brilliant way out. Instead of illuminating everything at once, he limited the number of lighting sources in the workspace, thereby reducing the necessary computational resources for rendering. The light source only illuminated a small area, while the rest of the space remained shrouded in darkness. This was a significant breakthrough for Team Silent. The game engine was now ready and the main task remained: to craft a narrative that would compel players to venture into the unknown, navigating through darkness and fear. A darkness filled with mysteries, symbolism, and psychological horror. Toyama's background in film education proved invaluable for this task. His initial sources of inspiration were the horror stories of the time, notably the release of the renowned TV series by American director David Lynch, Twin Peaks, provided the foundation for the creation of Silent Hill, a town developed in secret. Toyama was also influenced by the works of Czech director, sculptor, and animator Jan Schwenkmeyer. Just take a look at one of his works. Moreover, films like Jacob's Ladder, 1990, played a crucial role in shaping the future game's imagery. The developers drew inspiration from it for the main character's suffering from delirium. They also drew from other intense films by directors like Stanley Kubrick and Alfred Hitchcock. With the groundwork laid for creating the setting of a small, mysterious American town, the question of the game's name arose. Since the series Twin Peaks was named after the town where the events unfolded, what name would the Silent team choose? One might assume they named the game after their team, but apparently it was the other way around. Team Silent initially explored names similar to Twin Peaks in America itself among real city names. However, they found nothing interesting. Eventually, someone on the team simply translated the name of their hometown, Shizuoka, into English, and the team that worked on it became known as Team Silent. Having almost everything necessary to work on the game, Toyama still lacked something: a compelling plot. Additionally, programmers encountered a significant problem. While creating 3D locations of the city on the engine developed by Oshima, the team once again faced RAM limitations. Deciding to reduce the planned locations was a critical choice that transformed the city into a more intimate setting, reminiscent of the first Resident Evil game. At this point, fate provided Toyama with a solution. One day, he stumbled upon a translation of Stephen King's story The Mist. The story revolves around the small American town of Bridgeton, Maine, suddenly enveloped in an unnaturally thick fog. In the story, the artist David and his son Billy encounter horrific phenomena and monsters emerging from the fog while on a grocery run in the city. Sound familiar? After reading the story, Toyama's mind was flooded with ideas. The fog emerged as a solution that further alleviated the need for detailed backgrounds. Moreover, the fog created a more mysterious atmosphere, akin to a dream or delirium. The narrative of David and his son soon served as the foundation for the plot, albeit with Toyama's alterations. Gradually, the main characters of the game began to take shape in the developer's imagination. Driven by Toyama's desire to imbue the characters with symbolism, he drew inspiration from films, books, and real people. Initially, the main characters of Silent Hill, Harry and Cheryl Mason, were named Humbert and Dolores, akin to the main characters of Vladimir Nabokov's novel, Lolita. These names were quite unusual, and fortunately they were later replaced with more appealing ones for Western players. The name of the main character, Harry, corresponded to the nickname of one of the team members. The origins of why this developer was called Harry remain unknown. Cheryl was named after actress Cheryl Lee, renowned for her role as Laura Palmer in Twin Peaks. However, the connection to Lolita persisted in the game. The surname Mason was borrowed from James Mason, who portrayed Humbert in Stanley Kubrick's film adaptation of Lolita. Similarly, the names of the other characters were derived. The name of the female police officer, Sibyl Bennett, was inspired by Laurentia Bimgenek, a former police officer turned convicted killer, albeit with some adjustments for a smoother sound. The names of models Sibyl Buck and actress Sibyl Dunning came in handy. The nurse, Lisa Garland, took her name from actress Judy Garland, famed for her role as Dorothy Gale in the 1939 film The Wizard of Oz. All other characters, Michael Kaufman, Alyssa Gillespie, and Dalia Gillespie, were named after producers Lloyd Kaufman and Michael Hertz, known for B-movies, and the family of director Dario Argento. However, these references don't hold much significance within the game. Once the characters were settled, it was time to create monsters and creatures. This part of the team's process progressed much more swiftly as Masahiro Ito already possessed his own dark art style, which only needed to be aligned with the game's narrative. The enemies were meant to mirror the fears of the protagonist. Alessa, encompassing aversions to snakes, worms, and insects, as well as fears of dogs, adults, and unsettling elements from the girl's literature and insect collection. But more on that later. Undoubtedly, no true horror experience would be complete without a creepy sound design. Just imagine how different the legendary scene from the movie The Ring would feel with a different musical score. As previously mentioned, the music for Silent Hill was composed by Akira Yamaoka, an incredibly talented guy. Interestingly, he crafted the music without actually seeing the game scenes themselves. Despite claiming to have no formal music education and attributing his compositions to intuition, he acknowledges, "I still had to expand my knowledge of music. After all, Silent Hill was the first project that truly inspired and motivated me. It taught me how challenging it is to be original." Akira drew inspiration from the works of Angelo Badalamenti, the primary composer for Twin Peaks, as well as bands like Metallica and Depeche Mode. To differentiate Silent Hill from other video games and capture its bleak and foreboding atmosphere, Akira opted for the musical style of industrial, particularly its subgenres of noise and dark ambient. When he initially presented his compositions to the team, the developers were taken aback, mistaking the sounds for a technical glitch. Akira had to explain that these sounds constituted music. Eventually, everyone came to accept and even appreciate this unconventional sound, leading to the inclusion of Akira's work in the game. At this stage of development, the game was nearly complete. It remained a matter of relatively speaking. Takayoshi Sato, responsible for developing the in-game cinematics for Silent Hill, encountered numerous challenges. Despite Team Silent's status as outsiders of Konami, they shared all their struggles and, with trust in one another, worked together to overcome them as a cohesive unit. Unfortunately, this unity was not always present. Sato, the youngest member of the team, found himself distrusted with the task of creating 3D graphics because he was only engaged on font design and file organization for Silent Hill during development. Despite his valuable insights and consultations with Toyama and others, he felt undervalued. Frustrated by this treatment, Sato threatened to withhold his assistance from the team. Additionally, he showcased his best cinematic practices, which objectively were impressive, yet he was still denied the opportunity to lead. The reasons for this decision remain unclear. Nevertheless, Sato eventually secured a role as a video developer, albeit under supervision. For 2.5 years, Sato essentially lived in the office, dedicated to his craft. Sato's suffering was not in vain. In 1998, E3 in Atlanta loomed on the horizon, holding the potential fate of Silent Hill in its grasp. That same year, E3 was slated to unveil several highly anticipated titles, including Valve's legendary Half-Life, the infamous Duke Nukem Forever, Tomb Raider 3, Baldur's Gate, Diablo 2, and Legacy of Kain: Soul Reaver. Speaking of the latter, we are preparing a dedicated video for our channel. So if you're interested, let us know in the comments and be sure to hit the like button. The more engagement we receive, the sooner the video will be released. Alongside these titans of the gaming world, Silent Hill faced another formidable competitor. That same year, Konami unveiled Hideo Kojima's masterpiece, Metal Gear Solid, to the world. One can only imagine the daunting challenge for a fledgling development team. And indeed, it materialized. All eyes were on Kojima's Metal Gear Solid and Half-Life as they swept accolades for the best PC and PlayStation games. What happened to Silent Hill? Unfortunately, it failed to capture as much attention from audiences as its creators had hoped. Though many sources note that it did manage to pique interest, it did so rather quietly. Notably, there was no nomination for Best Survival Horror at the previous year's E3. Perhaps the developers didn't get the desired result because Team Silent only presented cinematics rather than full-fledged gameplay. Alternatively, it could have been overshadowed by the juggernauts of the gaming industry producing popular series at the time. If Toyama and his team had unveiled the gameplay of Silent Hill a bit earlier, perhaps it could have been clinched the title of Best PlayStation Game. Apologies to Kojima. Nevertheless, E3 wasn't a complete loss. Silent Hill proved to be a revelation for Konami's management, who initially doubted the young developers. Team Silent managed to craft a game with a shoestring budget that rivaled those produced by multi-million-dollar corporations. So, with the release of the underrated project just a year away, Konami allocated additional funds for its development and marketing. We'll delve into the game's media promotions separately later on, as it's a compelling story. Apparently, it was advertising that rescued the game's sales. But for now, let's talk about what exactly the game was about. What was the plot that enamored players from the first launch? It's time to immerse ourselves in the enigmatic atmosphere of the captivating Silent Hill. The plot of Silent Hill remains as murky as a dark swamp, so brace yourself for unpleasant revelations. Recall the macabre works that inspired Toyama, won't you? And be forewarned, spoilers and sensitive content lie ahead. With our mission as virtuous storytellers accomplished, let's dive in. The mystical history of the town Silent Hill traces back long before the game's events. Its precise location remains uncertain, yet many signs point to the state of Maine, the birthplace of Stephen King. Considering Toyama's penchant for symbolism, it seems a fitting choice. In the 15th century AD, Native Americans inhabited the land where Silent Hill now stands. It is them who bestowed upon these lands the name Place of Quiet Spirits, believing spirits dwelled in its hills, deeming it a place of power. However, in the first half of the 17th century, British colonization of North America commenced, forcing the local tribe from their homeland. In its stead, the colonizers erected the town of Silent Hill atop the Indian settlement, occupying a small area north of Lake Toluca. They constructed modest dwellings, a tavern, a Balkan church, a Midwich primary school. But the settlement's prosperity was short-lived. By the early 18th century, a dreadful epidemic swept through the town, leading to its abandonment for a century. In 1812, amid the American War of Independence, Silent Hill was repurposed as a correctional colony, yet the scourge persisted, this time in the form of plague. Scores perished daily. To shield the healthy from the afflicted, Brookhaven Hospital was erected, where many spent their last days. Later, the hospital transitioned into a psychiatric facility, and upon the war's end, coal deposits were discovered in Silent Hill, sparking the city's resurgence. It began to thrive once more. The comic Silent Hill Past Life, written by screenwriter Tom Waltz, delves into this period of the town's history. The protagonists, Jebediah Foster and pregnant Esther Monroe, journey from the Dakota Territory to Silent Hill in search of a better life. But as always, those who are looking for a better life in Silent Hill find only mysticism, fear, and nightmares. We will definitely tell you about this couple separately in the following videos. After the events of Silent Hill Past Life, another conflict erupted, this time civil. Once again, the town bore witness to the horrors of war. A prisoner of war camp emerged near Brookhaven Hospital, later evolving into a full-fledged penitentiary. With the war's end, both the coal mine and prison shuttered, leaving few employment opportunities. To revitalize the city, it was reimagined as a resort town. Gradually, a plethora of food establishments, shops, amusement parks, and a hotel began to dot the cityscape. A police station, shopping center, and another hospital, Alsamilla, emerged. On the southern shore of Lake Toluca, adjacent to the psychiatric hospital, lay a resort area. It must have been quite the idyllic vacation spot for having fun. However, in 1918, tragedy struck during a tourist excursion on the lake when the steamer Little Baroness vanished without a trace. Nevertheless, E3 wasn't a complete loss. Silent Hill proved to be a revelation for Konami's management, who initially doubted the young developers. Team Silent managed to craft a game with a shoestring budget that rivaled those produced by multi-million-dollar corporations. So, with the release of the underrated project just a year away, Konami allocated additional funds for its development and marketing. We'll delve into the game's media promotions separately later on, as it's a compelling story. Apparently, it was advertising that rescued the game's sales. But for now, let's talk about what exactly the game was about. What was the plot that enamored players from the first launch? It's time to immerse ourselves in the enigmatic atmosphere of the captivating Silent Hill. The plot of Silent Hill remains as murky as a dark swamp, so brace yourself for unpleasant revelations. Recall the macabre works that inspired Toyama, won't you? And be forewarned, spoilers and sensitive content lie ahead. With our mission as virtuous storytellers accomplished, let's dive in. The mystical history of the town Silent Hill traces back long before the game's events. Its precise location remains uncertain, yet many signs point to the state of Maine, the birthplace of Stephen King. Considering Toyama's penchant for symbolism, it seems a fitting choice. In the 15th century AD, Native Americans inhabited the land where Silent Hill now stands. It is them who bestowed upon these lands the name Place of Quiet Spirits, believing spirits dwelled in its hills, deeming it a place of power. However, in the first half of the 17th century, British colonization of North America commenced, forcing the local tribe from their homeland. In its stead, the colonizers erected the town of Silent Hill atop the Indian settlement, occupying a small area north of Lake Toluca. They constructed modest dwellings, a tavern, a Balkan church, a Midwich primary school. But the settlement's prosperity was short-lived. By the early 18th century, a dreadful epidemic swept through the town, leading to its abandonment for a century. In 1812, amid the American War of Independence, Silent Hill was repurposed as a correctional colony, yet the scourge persisted, this time in the form of plague. Scores perished daily. To shield the healthy from the afflicted, Brookhaven Hospital was erected where many spent their last days. Later, the hospital transitioned into a psychiatric facility, and upon the war's end, coal deposits were discovered in Silent Hill, sparking the city's resurgence. It began to thrive once more. The comic Silent Hill Past Life, written by screenwriter Tom Waltz, delves into this period of the town's history. The protagonists, Jebediah Foster and pregnant Esther Monroe, journey from the Dakota Territory to Silent Hill in search of a better life. But as always, those who are looking for a better life in Silent Hill find only mysticism, fear, and nightmares. We will definitely tell you about this couple separately in the following videos. After the events of Silent Hill Past Life, another conflict erupted, this time civil. Once again, the town bore witness to the horrors of war. A prisoner of war camp emerged near Brookhaven Hospital, later evolving into a full-fledged penitentiary. With the war's end, both the coal mine and prison shuttered, leaving few employment opportunities. To revitalize the city, it was reimagined as a resort town. Gradually, a plethora of food establishments, shops, amusement parks, and a hotel began to dot the cityscape. A police station, shopping center, and another hospital, Alsamilla, emerged. On the southern shore of Lake Toluca, adjacent to the psychiatric hospital, lay a resort area. It must have been quite the idyllic vacation spot for having fun. However, in 1918, tragedy struck during a tourist excursion on the lake when the steamer Little Baroness vanished without a trace, taking all passengers with it. Then, in 1939, several more water-related accidents occurred, dealing a fatal blow to the local travel industry. Another 2.5 decades passed, and in 1963, under mysterious circumstances, the mayor and numerous city officials perished. Thus, within 50 years, Silent Hill once again devolved into a ghost town. This tumultuous period in Silent Hill's history is depicted in the 2007 game Silent Hill Origins, set in 1970, 7 years before the events of the first part. The protagonist, Travis Grady, a trucker, as a typical character of a game, is plagued by haunting nightmares related to his past. In this part, we meet Alyssa Gillespie, her deranged mother, Dahlia Gillespie, Dr. Michael Kaufman, and Lisa Garland. They play an important role for the first part of the franchise, but first things first. And so we go directly to the events of the first game. From this mystical scene, the game's opening video, the events of the first part of Silent Hill begin. To comprehend it fully, let's rewind to its origins. Once upon a time, there lived a woman named Dahlia Gillespie, a fervent devotee of a clandestine cult. She venerated an icon depicting the demon, Samael. and generally considered him a real god. As a classic fanatic, she decided to devote her life to it. Consumed by fanaticism, she wanted to give birth to the demon. 14 years before the events of the game, Gillespie had a daughter, Alessa. Yet instead of raising her daughter, Dalia intended to utilize Alessa's body to give birth to the demon Samael. For the ritual to proceed, young Alessa had to wish for the demon's birth herself. Thus, from childhood, she was subjected to her mother's satanic indoctrination. Forced prayers to the demon became routine, and in the end, the mother beat the little girl and locked her in the moldy nursery, so that Alessa would never see anything in her life but the insult of the horned devil. Actually, because of this upbringing, Alessa was always a scared and downtrodden girl, even when the mother was forced to send her daughter to school. Because of this, her classmates began to mock her, but it was only good for the grief-stricken mother. Why did she do this, you may ask? Gillespie's idea aimed to liberate humanity from suffering by plunging their lives into utter hell. She believed that by making suffering the norm and deeming happiness a sin would ultimately benefit her daughter and others. After 7 years of cruel upbringing, Gillespie resolved to enact the ritual of birthing God with Alessa. Why she did it exactly after 7 years is unknown. Ideal age? No, she just wanted to do it just like that. And the fanatic woman did to Alessa the thing that they once did to the Italian philosopher Giordano Bruno. In Gillespie's twisted plan, Alessa's death throes would herald the birth of the demon. However, there was one thing. Alessa had to wish for the demon's birth, which her mother's abusive upbringing thwarted. Following preparations for the ritual, the deranged mother locked Alessa in a room and set their home ablaze. Yet her plan faltered. A passing trucker, Travis, rescued the barely alive Alessa from the inferno, thwarting Gillespie's intentions. As a consequence of Alessa's unwillingness to birth the demon amidst the flames, her soul seemingly fractured into 2 parts. The first part imbued the newborn baby discovered by Harry Mason and his wife, as depicted in the game's opening. Meanwhile, the second part remained trapped with Alessa's nightmarish inner realm, perpetually fueling the demon's power. Now, let's delve into a fan theory, or rather, an unsettling speculation. Regarding the origin of the child taken in by the Mason family, given the relatively realistic nature of preceding events, this theory posits a realistic explanation, but be prepared that this theory is not for the vulnerable. Consider that Gillespie intended Alessa to birth a demon, yet after the ritual, a child is born. What if Alessa herself was pregnant, drawing parallels to real-life instances of demon-worshipping sects engaging in ritualistic and intimate practices? This hypothesis gains disturbing plausibility. Despite the failed ritual, Gillespie, Alessa's mother, remained fixated on birthing her god. Having agreed with Dr. Michael Kaufman from El Camilla Hospital, she clandestinely relocated Alessa to the hospital's basement for safekeeping. There, a young nurse named Lisa Garland was tasked with caring for Alessa, unwittingly drawn into her nightmarish realm by the girl's powerful influence. Once again, we find evidence supporting the theory of the child's reality. Nurse Lisa, tending to Alessa's charred remains, discovered her pregnancy and extracted the baby from her burned body. Swaddled in diapers, she discreetly left the infant by the roadside, ensuring someone would find and care for her. And indeed, fate played its hand. The protagonist of the first part of the Silent Hill series, Harry Mason and his wife Jody, stumbled upon the abandoned baby during their travels. It was Jody who named the girl Cheryl. All this backstory was conveyed solely through the game's opening cutscene. The main plot of the game begins with Harry Mason and his daughter Cheryl's journey to the resort town of Silent Hill. The girl wants to somehow distract herself from Jody's death. Their tranquil drive is interrupted when a police motorcycle written by Sybil Bennett overtakes them. Sybil, investigating a prohibited substances case, is bound for Silent Hill 2, yet neither of them reach their destination without incident. First, Sybil's motorcycle crashes. Distracted by the accident, Harry fails to notice a young girl standing in the darkness. In a split second, attempting to brake, Harry's car careens off the road, smashing into a fence, and he loses consciousness. When he awakens, he sees that Cheryl has disappeared. He heads to the fog-shrouded city in search of his daughter. The streets of old Silent Hill appear completely abandoned, yet Harry is moving forward. Spotting Cheryl on another empty street, he gives chase, eventually finding himself in a dim, narrow alleyway. Suddenly, the sky darkens, a siren wails in the distance, and as Harry illuminates the path with a lighter, the surroundings transform into a nightmarish landscape. The road becomes rusty metal platforms. Walls morph into metal barriers and blood-soaked, rust-covered wire fences line the way, with the chilling sight of suspending bodies looming in the shadows. Industrial sounds of clanging metal and screeching fill the air. Lost and disoriented, Harry moves forward, only to stumble upon a mutilated body hanging from the fence. Within moments, he's attacked by childlike monsters and meets his demise.
I have been stabbed, shot, poisoned, frozen, hung, electrocuted, and burned.
Oh, really?
Harry awakens in an abandoned cafe and encounters Sybil Bennett, who had recently been involved in the crash. Following a brief conversation, she gives Harry a gun and sets off in search of help. Meanwhile, Harry scavenges the diner, finding a map, knife, and flashlight. Upon attempting to exit, a radio on a nearby table emits static, drawing Harry's attention just as a monster crashes through the window, launching an attack. The main character, fortunately, kills the monster. From this moment on, Harry Mason embarks on his quest to find his daughter in the terrible, foggy, and chilling city of Silent Hill. Following clues left by his daughter, Harry eventually arrives at Midwich Elementary School. Instead of the usual hustle and bustle of students and teachers, he encounters warped corridors teeming with monstrous children. Once again, Silent Hill morphs into a nightmarish realm, reminiscent of Harry's initial arrival in the city. Navigating through the blood-soaked school halls, in the boiler room, Harry confronts the first boss of the game, Splithead. After defeating him, the darkness recedes, revealing the boiler room in its natural state. There, Alyssa Gillespie appears. Leaning against the cauldron, she turns to Harry before vanishing into the air. Confused, Harry leaves the school. He hears the church bell ringing from afar. He arrives at a Balkan church, where he encounters a woman deep in prayer at the altar. Their conversation reveals her to be none other than Dahlia Gillespie, the same deranged mother. Dahlia gives Harry a mystical pyramid-like object called Flaros and urgently instructs him to proceed to the hospital. Following Dahlia's order, Harry arrives at Alchemilla Hospital, where he encounters Dr. Michael Kaufman, a doctor who, like Harry, is puzzled by what is happening in the town of Silent Hill. At this point, for the first time in the game, we learn that Harry's wife, Jodie, died 4 years ago. It's later revealed that Harry and Jodie longed for a child but were thwarted by Jodie's illness, leading to her demise and Harry's subsequent descent into depression. But returning to the present, Dr. Kaufman provides Harry with a vial of red liquid, Agliofotis, imbued with the magical ability to banish demons spawned from Alessa's nightmares. Upon receiving the Agliofotis, Harry is once again transported to the other world, where Alchemilla Hospital is overrun by terrible nurses. Along his path, he encounters Lisa Garland, a terrified nurse who is also clueless about Cheryl's whereabouts. Suddenly, during their conversation, Harry is struck by a sharp headache and loses consciousness, only to awaken in Dr. Kaufman's office in the normal world, accompanied not only by himself, but also by Dahlia Gillespie. She warns him that the brand of Samael, a mysterious symbol he's encountered during his search, must not be completed, or else the darkness will consume the entire city. After this interesting conversation, Dahlia disappears, prompting Harry to rush to meet Sybil Bennett at the antique shop building. Inside, Harry stumbles upon a secret passage. As he explores, Sybil arrives in a hurry, informing Harry of a sighting of a girl by the lake. Before embarking on the search for Cheryl, Harry decides to investigate the secret passage he's discovered. Deep within, Harry encounters a satanic altar cleverly disguised as a church. As the altar ignites, Harry is thrust into the other world of Alchemilla Hospital. In a half-conscious state, he finds himself sharing space with Lisa Garland, who unravels the town's dark history. It turns out that Dahlia Gillespie lost her daughter in a tragic fire, sending her spiraling into madness. Lisa, feeling an ominous foreboding, guides Harry toward the lake but senses she couldn't accompany him, as Dahlia had forewarned her of an impending arrival of a dark demon. After this darkness envelops Harry and he awakens from his delirium in the real Alchemilla Hospital. Once free from the hospital's confines, Harry ventures to the resort area on the opposite side of the lake in search of Cheryl. Scaling through underground sewer tunnels, Harry climbs to the surface. At this point, players are presented with a side quest to rescue Kaufman from the clutches of the monster's jaws. Or the player can skip this quest, and then, at some point, the streets of the city will become even more impenetrable. The horror of the other world will begin to completely take over the city. In search of his daughter, Harry goes to an abandoned barge where he meets Sybil. In their conversation, Harry proposes disrupting the brand of Samael, as advised by Dahlia. Sybil agrees. At the same time, in the middle of the conversation, Dahlia Gillespie appears behind the characters' backs and begins to add even more fuel to the fire. She implores them to halt the girl who both Sybil and Harry have encountered until Cheryl dies. It's revealed that Alessa, rendered immortal, acted as a vessel for a deity, her soul split in two to prevent its birth. One part remained with her, while the other infused the newborn Cheryl, whom Lisa took from the hospital and left by the roadside. Subsequently, the baby was found and adopted by Harry Mason and his wife. Unaware of the full truth, Harry and Sybil listen to Delia's words and split up. Harry heads for the lighthouse, while Sybil makes her way to the lakeside amusement park. At the lighthouse, Harry sees Alessa and the ominous brand of Samael, but he hasn't time to do anything, and Alessa vanishes into the fog. Meanwhile, Sybil finds herself ensnared in a trap at the amusement park, her surroundings infested with the same parasitic creatures plaguing Alchemilla Hospital's otherworldly nurses. Thus begins a boss battle, with Harry facing a tough choice, to either dispatch Sybil or to save her by throwing a Glaphotis at her. The latter option, where Harry saves Sybil, is considered the canonical scenario for the Silent Hill series. Following Sybil's rescue, Harry encounters Alessa once more, though this time she doesn't run away. As Harry approaches, Alessa repels him with an unseen force. Suddenly, Harry notices the Flauros given to him by Delia glowing in his pocket. Activating it, Flauros saps Alessa's strength, revealing Delia's presence. She confesses to manipulating Harry, using him to imprison Alessa, who is revealed to be her daughter. Delia also discloses that she invoked a spell to merge Cheryl back into Alessa when she turned 7. With this revelation, Harry now understands everything. Delia takes Alessa and Harry awakens once more in the warped corridors of Alchemilla Hospital. Now, this location is called Nowhere. Within this nightmarish location, Harry catches glimpses of Alessa's childhood torment.
No, I don't want to. Do what Mommy tells you now.
A girl cries in fear in a corner of a dark room. Obviously, it was her nursery. Harry sees a lot of eyes on the walls around him and a huge image of the same demon. And if you look closely, then among all the children's doodles, you can read, "Help me," and "Kill Mom." In Nowhere, Harry witnesses memories of encounters with Delia, Kaufman, and occult doctors discussing Alessa's hospitalization and the rebirth of God. Eventually, he encounters Delia and Sybil, if of course she was saved earlier, as well as a bandaged figure in a wheelchair, Cheryl. Cheryl and Alessa are reunited, and Alessa's astral projection is sitting next to each other. This creepy scene begins the final battle in the plot of the first part of Silent Hill. But we will tell you about the final a little further, because everything is not so clear with it in the game. Before delving into the game's endings, let's examine its gameplay and attempt to unravel the enigmatic occurrences within the peculiar town of Silent Hill as a whole. Perhaps we've reached the most crucial part of our Silent Hill gameplay video. Naturally, the game's storyline is incredibly captivating and atmospheric, often diverting the player's attention away from the gameplay itself. Amidst the mystique of events and our own fears as we wander the gray streets of the foggy city, we often overlook the game's sound design and how it prompts the player to take specific actions, contributing to the immersive atmosphere. As you may know, the primary objective set by the developers is to find the missing Cheryl. However, when considering it, Silent Hill isn't a straightforward game in terms of mechanics. Of course, over 20 years of technological advancements, the game has noticeably aged, but the first part of Silent Hill today can be quite painful. It's not only about the absence of a modern remake, oddly the second part received one before the first, so let's try to mentally transport ourselves to the time of the game's initial release. The first obstacle players encounter was the rather clunky, tank-like controls of the main character, which took considerable time to be accustomed to. The player's arsenal included various items and crucial to the plot or puzzle solving. Additionally, there were hills and weapons displayed in the inventory panel. The health bar was also visible in the inventory, which on one hand proved to be a drawback as it required the player to frequently switch between the main interface and the inventory just to check their health. On the other hand, it facilitated full immersion in the game without distractions from extraneous icons, which was definitely a plus. To enhance immersion further, the developers introduced an interesting mechanic. When Harry was in poor health, the player could hear his heartbeat accompanied by vibrations from the game controller. However, in secret, Toyama borrowed this idea from Resident Evil. Among the weapons at the main character's disposal were a kitchen knife, a pistol, a steel pipe, a hammer, an axe, a shotgun, and even a katana. Yes, you heard that right. A Japanese katana. Given that the game was made by a Japanese studio, it's no surprise to find canonically Japanese weapons included, even if the events unfold in an American town somewhere on the edge of the earth. However, the katana in the game is just an Easter egg. To get it, the player must complete the game twice following a specific combination of game endings. Similar to Resident Evil, there isn't just one ending in the game, but multiple. We'll delve into this in more detail later on. In addition to the katana, players can get unique weapons such as the chainsaw, drill, and laser pistol. Why did Team Silent decide to add a laser pistol in the midst of a mystical and terrifying game? Well, why not if it is funny? Sometimes you need to somehow cheer yourself up by going through all those terrible corridors of psychological hell. To be fair, both the laser pistol and the katana serve as rewards for unlocking specific endings in the game. Aside from weapons, other crucial items in Harry's arsenal are a radio and a flashlight. The radio alerts the player to approaching enemies, while the flashlight pierces through the increasing darkness that shrouds the town of Silent Hill. This darkness unnerved countless players of Silent Hill. From the onset, it served not merely as a visual effect, but as a character in its own right, embodying the horror that slowly drags the town into the abyss. It's where conventional logic ceases to apply, and reality morphs into a nightmare, a manifestation of the developer's intent. Just as our dreams and nightmares reveal our deepest desires and fears, the darkness enveloping Silent Hill guides the main character, unraveling the mysteries of this accursed place, helping to get the essence of all things. It is darkness that leads the main character through deceptively quiet and foggy streets. Darkness breaks the boundaries of the real world and the other world. Darkness was Alessa's first and greatest fear. It is from darkness that all the vile monsters that we can see during the passage of the game are born. Thus, the role of the main character and the light he carries embodies in a simple flashlight becomes profoundly significant. This light exposes the city's hidden corners, where crimes, death, and eternal dread lurk. Horrors humanity desperately sought to conceal from the world. But that's not all. The darkness and the shifting spaces in Silent Hill, transitioning from normal to otherworldly, adhere to a simple logic akin to the stages of human sleep. Among these stages, deep sleep, also known as paradoxical or REM sleep, mirrors the brain activity of a person in a state of wakefulness. It's during this stage that sleepwalkers venture forth and where we often encounter our most terrifying nightmares. If we track the changes in the world and Harry's perception of events in Silent Hill, we'll notice a pattern akin to how dreams unfold. Harry, initially grounded in the belief that he's in the real world, gradually transitions to the realization that his surroundings are unreal, just like a dream. And then he gradually moves on to the stage of paradoxical sleep and sees the horrors in reality. And all this has been happening to Harry since he woke up from an accident on the night road. You might wonder, whose dream has he entered? The answer lies both in the game's plot and what unfolds in Silent Hill. A plethora of weird monsters birthed from Alessa's troubled subconscious, shaped by her deepest fears. From a dread of snakes, worms, and insects to a fear of dogs and adults, these grotesque creatures were molded over the years by religious texts and childhood tales Alessa immersed herself in. And of course, where would she go without her crazy mom, Delia Gillespie? So the first encounter awaiting the game's protagonist is the Air Screamer, a human-sized, pterodactyl-like creature armed with a powerful beak and claws. The main strength of this aerial reptile is the ability to fly. These airborne reptiles typically roam in groups like vultures. The creature is found in open urban spaces. As the otherworld fueled by Alessa's psyche intensifies, the Air Screamer metamorphoses into the Night Flutter, a repulsive, faster and stronger version adorned with vile worms crawling over its flesh. The creature's genesis can be traced back to an illustration of a pterodactyl on the cover of The Lost World by Conan Doyle. It was obviously etched in Alessa's memory forever. After all, the girl began to believe that they really exist. Another manifestation of Alessa's horror which is associated with the animal is the Groaner, a creature resembling a charred Doberman with peeling skin and sightless eyes, relying on heightened senses of smell and hearing. The Groaner emerges when the character makes loud noises or shoots guns, making Silent Hill ironically reminiscent of a real quiet place from our childhoods. And naturally, as Alessa's nightmarish world escalates, the Groaner, as the Air Screamer, evolves into a more powerful monster, the Wormhead. This abominable creature's head is infested with terrible worms, a representation of Alessa's fear of large dogs, especially the angry dog in the alley on Finn Street, and the dog that lives in the booth on Levin Street. Because of her fear, the girl wished these dogs an evil fate, which was reflected in her children's drawings. In Alessa's room, you can see drawings of these poor dogs.
A child's drawings are scattered on the floor. That uniform on the wall there, I think this is Alessa's room. Girl's clothing hangs on the wall. 6, maybe 7. Must be a kid about that age.
The next monster Harry might encounter is the Grey Child, the same ones who kill Harry in the alley at the start of the game. The name of this monster speaks for itself. These creatures resemble small boys wielding large kitchen knives. These little rascals persistently attempt to grab Harry's legs and slash at anything within reach. In the world of Silent Hill, these monsters stem from Alessa's fear of her schoolmates. Their attacks with knives reflect Alessa's memories of enduring relentless bullying and torment from her peers, exacerbating her already troubled home life. The Grey Child can further evolve into more formidable monsters, Mumblers. Mumblers lose much of their humanoid form and instead resemble bald, feral creatures who look like wolverines. Nope, the real wolverines, which can be found in the wilds of Canada, but armed with giant, razor-sharp knives. In general, there's a separate story connected with these Grey Children. Different versions of Silent Hill feature varied depictions of these monsters due to censorship concerns. The child's image was constantly changing due to problems with censorship. After all, in the beginning, they looked like real little children with knives. The Game Evaluation Committee showed 3 times dissatisfaction with the appearance of the monster, as well as the fact that the players actually had to attack small children. Even for the game, it was too much. By the way, the design changes also affected the next character. The Larval Stalker, small shadow haunting the school and amusement park locations. They cannot directly harm the main character, but emit an irritating squeak that can scare you more than any screamer. These monsters are a reflection of Alessa's memories of how she was mocked at school. However, the Larval Stalker didn't always look as it does now. Just look at what Larval Stalker looked like in the beta version of the game. The sounds that accompanied it were also different. This individual seems to look more funny than threatening. However, the ethics committee did not think so. From the fears that accompanied Alessa at school, let's move on to the horrors of the hospital. In general, Silent Hill was one of the first games that began to use the hospital as an image of horror, an understandable choice given the imagery of syringes, scalpels, lurking diseases, disgruntled dentists, long queues, and the omnipresence of pain and blood. If this description sends shivers down your spine, imagine the horror it evoked in 7-year-old Alessa confined to a hospital ward. That's why her consciousness spawned the puppet nurses and puppet doctors. These are hospital staff overtaken by a mystical parasite lodged onto their backs, manipulating their actions. Armed with sharp scalpels, they assail the main character, attempting to carve out a delectable morsel. Furthermore, there are several nurse variants in the game: blue blondes, blue brunettes, and green blondes. Interestingly, the green blonde variant is the liveliest and most perilous of them all. The reason behind this remains a mystery, perhaps linked to Nurse Lisa's character, but it's purely speculative. Another manifestation of Alessa's fear of adults is the Romper, a humanoid creature bearing a striking resemblance to a monkey, darting about in rapid jumps and inhabiting the busyness and resort districts of the town. Rompers assault the player just like a primate, leaping upon them to immobilize and targeting their throat. Yet there's more. When a jumper rushes at a player, sitting on top of him and not allowing him to get up, this is a hint of physical violence and forced intimacy on the part of cult members, which also symbolizes the desire of adults to conquer someone else's will with the weight of their authority. However, amidst all these monsters, the truly grotesque creatures in the first part of Silent Hill are those linked to Alessa's fear of insects and crawling creatures. Hardly surprising for a little girl. One such example is the Creeper, a colossal cockroach-like insect lurking in schools, hospitals, and sewers. The Creeper is not as strong as other enemies, but it compensates for its shortcomings with high speed and the habit of always attacking in packs. Then there's the Hung Scratcher, a green monstrosity residing in sewers, resembling a gigantic grasshopper. Armed with elongated claws, it traverses the ceiling with ease. Rounding out the extensive roster of monsters in Silent Hill is the Bloodsucker, Externally, there are several serpentine tentacles that feed on human blood and look like giant leeches from the movie King Kong. You can meet bloodsuckers in the hospitals, and as for the interpretation of what exactly caused Alessa such fear, there are several versions. Primarily, they symbolize her dread of snakes, or leeches. Another perspective suggests they represent her aversion to injections and blood transfusions. Despite Alessa's disdain for insects, she still loved butterflies. She even had a collection in her room. However, this contradiction raises questions, particularly when encountering a butterfly boss during the game. If Alessa cherished butterflies, why do they manifest as a source of fear? So let's take a look at all the bosses in the game in turn. The first boss in Silent Hill that the main character encounters is Splithead, a massive lizard with a vertically divided head, vulnerable only at its mouth. Splithead is reminiscent of a monster from a story about a hunter and a lizard that Alessa read in the school library. Interestingly, as a child, Alessa often heard strange sounds emanating from the boiler room, leading her to believe that the lizard from the tale resided there. Consequently, the boss battle with Splithead occurs in the boiler room, with the creature emitting sounds of boiler before the confrontation. Does anyone truly understand how children's imagination works and how to get rid of it in adulthood? The subsequent boss encounter in the game is Twin Feeler, a colossal moth larva with 2 elongated antennae, capable of burrowing into sand and launching attacks from beneath the ground. However, Twin Feeler is more of an interim boss. After the first victory, it evolves into the giant butterfly mentioned earlier, but the thing is, it's not exactly a butterfly. This is a giant moth named Float Stinger. Float Stinger serves as a reflection of Alessa's beloved butterfly collection. Its defeat briefly dispels the darkness of the horror world, momentarily recalling Alessa's sole pleasant memories. Unfortunately, this marks Alessa's final pleasant recollection before the true horrors of Silent Hill ensue for both her and the player. The next boss in the game is possessed by Sybil Bennett, who falls under the influence of the same parasite afflicting the hospital staff. Armed with a pistol, Bennett can instantly reduce the player's health with a single shot. If the player approaches Bennett, she will either shoot or attempt to strangle them. Various game endings are also associated with Bennett's murder. If the player defeats her conventionally, they'll achieve either a good or bad ending. However, using a vial of red liquid found in Alchemilla Hospital to purge the parasite from Bennett results in a good plus or bad plus ending. Remember it. We'll delve into the endings themselves shortly. One of the final bosses in Silent Hill is the Incubator, or Saint Alessa, an entity formed from the fusion of Cheryl and Alessa's physical and astral bodies. In other words, Cheryl and Alessa are in the same body. This amalgamation creates a beautiful angelic woman emitting heavenly light and clad in pristine white robes. Despite her divine appearance, Saint Alessa remains a monster capable of lethally electrocuting the player with blue lightning bolts. At the same time, the Incubator is one of the simplest bosses in the game because Harry dies from several well-aimed shots. Ultimately, the player will face the Incubator only if he or she fails to complete a side quest involving Kaufman. Completing this quest prompts Kaufman to intervene, hurling a vial of red liquid at the Incubator, triggering its transformation into the game's final boss, the terrifying dark demon, Incubus, also known as Samael. The winged deity with the head of a horned goat is the same demon depicted in the icon at Gillespie Church and in Alessa's drawings in her room. In medieval folklore, Incubus was a demon known for preying upon women in their sleep, satisfying its own sexual desires without their consent and inflicting serious illness upon those it dishonored. In appearance, Incubus bears resemblance to Baphomet, a deity representing Satan in ancient imagery characterized by an indeterminate gender. This connection finds confirmation in the Bible. The Gospel of Luke says, "I saw Satan fall, a bolt of lightning out of the sky. See what I've given you? Safe passage as you walk on snakes and scorpions, and protection from every assault of the enemy. No one can put a hand on you. All the same, the great triumph is not in your authority over evil, but in God's authority over you and presence with you. Not what you do for God, but what God does for you. That's the agenda for rejoicing." Unfortunately, scorpions and snakes won't appear on the floor during the battle with the Incubus. Instead, Incubus will unleash lightning bolts which can pose a significant threat. Consequently, the player must evade these attacks diligently to avoid his ass being fried. Nonetheless, even Satan is an eternal in the world of Silent Hill. Once the Incubus is vanquished, we proceed to the highly anticipated game finales. In total, Silent Hill offers 4 main game endings, contingent upon the completion of side tasks and the player's ingenuity. The first, and canonical final, according to the official guide for the game from Konami, Book of Lost Memories, is deemed the good ending. This ending serves as a bridge between the first part of the game and the forthcoming Silent Hill 3. To achieve this finale, the player must fulfill Kaufman's side quest and eliminate the possessed Cybele Bennett. Upon meeting all the conditions and reaching the final location, the player witnesses the following picture. Gillespie performs a ritual and Alyssa merges with Cheryl, transforming into an incubator. Suddenly, Kaufman appears, shoots Stelia, and douses the incubator with red liquid. As the bottle shatters, the liquid splashes onto the incubator, causing it to collapse. The creature falls to the floor and an incubus begins to crawl out of its back. Without even thinking you, Incubus kills Gillespie, then switches to Harry. Ultimately, Harry defeats Incubus and he turns back into an incubator. The creature gives Harry a child and indicates the path to salvation. Harry heads for the exit. Kaufman attempts to follow, but is intercepted by Lisa, who drags him into the abyss. The incubator perishes in the flames. Harry, accompanied by the soundtrack of Killing Time, reaches the outskirts of Silent Hill, gazes at the sky, and recalls everything that happened to him. Another positive ending of the game is considered good plus. In this scenario, the player completes Kaufman's side quest and saves the possessed Cybele Bennett. This finale closely resembles the standard good ending, except when Cybele attempts to shoot Gillespie, she is shielded by some kind of force field. Gillespie then resumes the reunion ritual. After defeating Incubus, Harry and Cybele join Kaufman in an attempt to escape. Kaufman is dragged into the abyss, but Harry and Cybele press on towards the exit. The incubator, with its last remnants of strength, delays the impending destruction. Exhausted, the incubator succumbs to the flames, and Harry and Cybele escape with the baby, accompanied by the musical composition Tears of. Harry leaves Silent Hill. Interestingly, if the player decides to replay the game immediately after this ending in the opening video where a child is found on the road, Cybele Bennett herself stands along Harry instead of his wife. How she ended up there remains a mystery. In contrast to the 2 positive endings, the player can also experience 2 negative ones during the game. The first such is bad plus. To achieve this final, the player must neglect Kaufman's side quest and fail to save the possessed Cybele. Following this, Gillespie conducts the ritual to reunite the incubator, which subsequently incapacitates Gillespie. Cybele Bennett intervenes but fails to vanquish the creature. Harry is then compelled to confront the incubator. Upon defeating it, he hears Cheryl's voice thanking him and bidding farewell. Harry falls to the ground, grappling with the realization of his daughter's loss. Cybele approaches him, urging him to leave the place with the phrase, "Let's go." The musical theme of this finale, She, plays in the background. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect lies in the final bad ending. To achieve this, the player must refrain from completing Kaufman's side quest and instead kill Cybele. This leads to an outcome similar to the bad plus ending, yet with a twist. Following the end credits, players witness a bloodied Harry seated in his car at the beginning of game. This revelation suggests that all the events in Silent Hill might merely be Harry dying delirium. This ending carries a notable irony, as at one juncture in the game, Harry contemplates whether his experiences are nothing more than a hospital-bound dream following a car accident. But wait, this isn't the game's ultimate finale. Remember the elusive laser pistol obtainable in Silent Hill? To acquire it, players must unlock the game's secret ending, wherein Harry is abducted by aliens. Yes, you heard it right. By employing the channeling stone 5 times at specific locations during gameplay, a unique artifact within the game, players summon a UFO after the 5th use. After it lands, a whimsical animated comic strip unfolds, depicting a scene where Harry, inquiring about his daughter, is instead whisked away by extraterrestrials. And that's how the game concludes. I'm curious, what's your favorite game finale? Share it in the comments below, and let's see how many UFO fans are among us. Did you catch the funny reference from the developers to the X-Files series? Indeed, Silent Hill is brimming with Easter eggs, from the character names we've already discussed to its uncanny plot resemblance to Stephen King's The Mist. Even the street names in Silent Hill carry significance. Bachman Road plays homage to Stephen King's pseudonym Richard Bachman, while Block Street nods to Alfred Hitchcock's screenwriter for the spine-chilling thriller Psycho, Robert Bloch. Additionally, streets in the game bear the names of Ray Bradbury and James Ellroy, all authors associated with thrillers and horror. The game is teeming with Easter eggs, not just on the map. For instance, a mini store on the street bears a logo reminiscent of 7-Eleven but with an 8 instead of a 7. Similarly, the gas station near the Balkan Church sports a logo resembling that of Shell gas stations. Inside the Orange Bridge control room, magazines with covers resembling Playboy can be found. Even a Pepsi logo adorns a park bench, alongside a reference to Konami itself. Alessa's room features drawings on the walls reminiscent of those in the 1973 film The Exorcist, and in the final location, Nowhere, a door bears the chilling inscription, "Help me," reminiscent of the suffering heroine in The Exorcist.
Look, I'm only against the possibility of doing your daughter more harm than good.
Nothing you could do could make it any worse.
After completing the game, the player has the opportunity to open an additional menu of features. This feature is somewhat of a secret from the developers, allowing players to tweak elements such as blood color, maximum round count, and game camera type. This enables players to replay the game from a first-person perspective. Apparently, this is about how visitors to E3 1998 could see Silent Hill, if only the game had been released slightly earlier. If the studio management had initially believed in the project, if Team Silent had been given more time and a larger budget, Silent Hill could have overshadowed all its competitors from the previous year. At E3, all the first-person shooters showcased were quite similar. With its unique plot, sound design mechanics, and multitude of endings, Silent Hill stood out remarkably. The abundance of Easter eggs within the game would make many developers envious today. Yet numerous ifs converged, leading to the game's eventual release a year later, where it didn't emerge as a market favorite. Now, Konami was faced with the question of how to sell its first horror game to young people. Looking back, and considering that Silent Hill still became popular and iconic, we can assume that somehow Konami managed to do this. Now let's plunge into how the first Silent Hill was launched. But before that, to take a little break from all the horrors that are happening at Silent Hill and calmly move on to the next part of the video, we want to remind you that you can subscribe to our channel and support the release of new videos with your activity. Your likes and comments contribute to the channel's growth and hasten the release of fresh content. If you enjoy what we do, let us know in the comments, give us a thumbs up, and let's continue. Konami recognized that effective marketing was crucial for the game's success, especially considering the age restrictions of 16+ in America and Europe and 18+ in Japan. With their primary audience being children and teenagers, Konami needed to devise a strategy to appeal to them while still attracting an adult audience. Initially, the company targeted the adult audience by showcasing Silent Hill at events like the European Computer Trade Show in London and the Tokyo Game Show. Attendees had the opportunity to experience the game firsthand. To further garner attention, Konami bundled a demo disc of Silent Hill with the popular game Metal Gear Solid. However, despite the renown of Metal Gear Solid, this promotional tactic didn't significantly impact future sales. The real breakthrough for Silent Hill came with its television advertising campaign, particularly in Europe and America. The commercials took the form of short thriller films, captivating viewers with their suspenseful atmosphere. Just take a look.
Play Silent Hill. You may never leave your room again for PlayStation from Konami.
Meanwhile, the advertising approach in Japan was even more intriguing. The Japanese promo video concluded with a quote from Koji Suzuki: "Fear, its origin is here." For your understanding, Koji Suzuki, known for his popular horror novels like the Ring series, was highly esteemed in Japan. His quote generated considerable excitement and interest in Silent Hill, fueling rumors that he had contributed to the game's script or even served as its ideological leader. Although difficult to verify, the speculation only added to the game's mystique, effectively promoting itself through hype. The game's budget was quite large. The studio spent $4 million on the game. Despite this, Silent Hill sold over 500,000 copies in America in its first month. Similarly impressive numbers were in Europe, the Middle East, South Asia, and Africa. In Japan, it surpassed 200,000 copies sold within the first week, reaching over 1 million copies in sales within a year. Overall, Silent Hill sold over 2 million copies worldwide, contributing approximately $70 million in net profit to Konami for the first part of the series.
I feel so alive!
Certainly, it's challenging to compare the success of Silent Hill to another Konami hit, Metal Gear Solid. Nevertheless, for Team Silent, the creators of Silent Hill, it marked a significant triumph. Despite the aforementioned age restrictions, the game garnered an impressive rating of nearly 85% on the Game Rankings portal and 86 points on Metacritic. Moreover, its huge sales propelled it into Sony's prestigious list of the greatest hits of all time. However, the game wasn't without its critiques. Many articles instinctively drew comparisons between Silent Hill and Resident Evil. Game publications pointed out plot gaps hindering gameplay progression, alongside criticism of the protagonist's challenging controls. And one of the main disadvantages that critics noted was that Silent Hill was not ported to other platforms. It was released in 1999 and remained forever on the disc for Sony PlayStation. Despite these criticisms, they paled in comparison to the game's overall success. Thus, the production of the sequel was merely a matter of time. The only potential obstacle was Team Silent's burnout. The arduous journey to success weighed heavily on the game's main designer, Keiichiro Toyama. Acutely aware of the game's shortcomings and the reasons behind them, he reproached himself for the year that had passed without doing anything when he and the team could not start development. And these self-reproaches led him to think that someone else, instead of him, could make the next game even better. In a difficult decision, Toyama left Konami in 1999 shortly after the game's release, shocking both Konami and the Team Silent division. Some team members couldn't envision continuing without Toyama and followed suit, including Takahashi Sato, a video designer, and Naoko Sato, involved in character design. Toyama found a new home at Sony Computer Entertainment, where he, Takahashi, and Naoko embarked on planning their new horror game, Siren. However, that's a story for another time. With seismic shifts in the development team, Konami faced the daunting question of how to proceed with the Silent Hill series and who would lead it. There were no ideas again. Thoughts about what the sequel should be did not give hope, and the situation reached a tipping point with the release of the PlayStation 2. Now, the sequel demanded by fans had to be developed from scratch for the new platform. What lies ahead for the legendary Silent Hill series? Who would step up as the new head of Team Silent? Could the company replicate its earlier success? Stay tuned for our next video, delving into the ups and downs of the Silent Hill series. While you eagerly await the continuation, we suggest watching our latest video, which you can find on your screen. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Your support greatly assists YouTube algorithms in promoting our content. Thank you for watching to the end. It was PressX. See you soon.